Hello everyone, I am Parth Agarwal, your host for the quiz The Question Falls. It is the under 25 quiz held under the series Parakh 2022. We'll be moving on to the rules now. This is a under 25 quiz. There are 22 questions in the quiz. Each question carries 10 points and no negative. In case of multiple parts in a question, the points will be divided equally. Questions 4, 8, 12, 16 and 20 are star marked questions. They will be used to resolve ties. A camera icon on the top left indicates that an image follows the question slide. You have to type in your answers in the G form only. You have to submit the G form within 90 seconds after the last question is closed. There will be no rerun of questions. And obviously, any unfair means would lead to immediate disqualification. We'll move on to question number 1 now. This strange practice was prevalent in Europe till as late as the middle of the 18th century. Historians believe that this practice was an extreme measure to ensure rules and regulations were upheld. Such practices created an impression that the authorities were working in a cooperative and a decided manner, no matter who the delinquents were. In some cases, such as low agricultural output, the church had to be included, as it was believed that the subjects were out of human control. Involvement of the Church in the matter is up for debate, but some economists believe that the Church got involved to increase tithe collection in areas of low tithe revenue. They achieved this by strengthening citizens' belief in the validity of church punishment. What practice is being talked about? We will wait for 5 more seconds. Now move to question number 2. The X Act is a law in a Canadian province that was passed in the late 2000s. The law made the word "Y" inadmissible in the court of law. While several US states already had similar laws in place, this law became particularly famous as it reinforced the stereotype of Canadians using the word "Y" excessively. A tweet about the law is shown below. Despite it reinforcing Canadian stereotypes, the X Act is a great piece of legislation. It was invoked regularly when I was a mediator to help people resolve often emotional disputes without fear of legal retribution. The power of an X should not be underestimated. What is X and why? So you have to give the act X and the word Y. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. The sales of X was banned in the country Y in the late 20th century. It was banned as it caused maintenance problems for the authorities. Though initially the authorities thought that a ban would be a bit excessive and placed some regulatory measures, like ban on television advertisements that promoted the sale of X. But after vandals started disrupting public transport services, the sale of X was finally banned. A senior figure in the government said, "Putting X on our subway train doors so that they don't open? I don't call that creativity. I call that mischief making." The country Y is a global financial center, and even though Y is democratic, it is known for its strict rules and harsh punishments. Identify X and the country Y. The words in bold, you have to look out for the words in bold as they will lead you to the answer. 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to question number 4. Question 4 is a star marked question. X is an extreme form of solitary confinement and sensory deprivation, used on prisoners to break their resolve or extract information. The inmates are kept in an all-Y room. The floor, the bed, the clothing, all are Y. Neon tubes are positioned in the room in specific locations so as to avoid casting shadows. The food served is also Y and unseasoned to deprive the inmate of sense of smell and taste. In an interview, a prisoner detailed their experience as the loneliest loneliness never leaves you long after you are free. A famous YouTuber survived 23 hours of X. His content revolves around learning a lot of new skills, as unusual as throwing a toothpick as a dart. What is X? Which gets its name from the absolute lack/absence of everything the prisoners experience. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. Are you aware that a woman has accused you of slapping her? The magistrate put the final question. I have never looked straight in the eyes of a woman outside my family. This woman is a liar. Y shot back angrily. Heavy losers borrowed money from Y or his men to buy groceries or other necessities. When Y noticed that this was becoming a trend, he decided to put an end to it by asking the borrowers to pay him interest on the 10th of every month for the borrowed sum. This discouraged some, but others remained undaunted. He noticed that his cash box swelled on the 10th of every month, and encouraged by this, he decided to become a money-lender. The concept of money-lender inspires Y's second name. One of the mafia queens of Mumbai treated this mafia don of Mumbai's criminal underbelly as her brother. Who is X and who, X, who is X here, and about whom are we talking? So we'll move to the next question in 5 seconds. Now we'll be moving on to the next question. X was a policy made in the 1970s. It was made with clear intentions, but was implemented rigorously to the point that it became a lifetime punishment for the criminal. The law was applied strictly in cities as the people understood the problem and positive effects of the policy, much more than the villagers would do. It gradually became a dead set rule, breaking which would cost generations of ill treatment and financial drainage. The director of a movie wanted to do a 360-degree with the policy, who found out that she herself was a victim of the policy. During the shoot of X Nation film, the movie won an award in the Sundance Film Festival. However, it was abolished recently in the late 2015 as it was complete torture for generations. Lawyers and citizens protested for decades and finally won. Name X, which is being talked about. So this particular policy was abolished in late 2015. We'll be moving to the next question in 5 seconds. We'll move on to question number 7. Unlike today, where candles are more of a decorative item, they used to be the main source of light in the earlier days. The government of United Kingdom saw this as an opportunity to raise revenue and introduced a candle tax in the earlier 18th century. Candle makers had to pay this tax on every candle they made, and unlicensed domestic production was illegalized. This was an immense blow to the poor folk, and they had to stop using candles altogether. People came up with an alternative alternative of rush lights, which were exempt from this tax. This dried stem of rush plant was soaked in tallow or animal fat and used instead. They were used in a manner that produced more light, the only downside being that they could only be used for a brief amount of time. This is the literal inspiration from an idiom which describes how a rushlight goes overboard and goes out quickly. How were the rushlights used that led to this idiom? Wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. Question 8 is a star marked question. The law, which was enacted by the British in India in the 19th century, reflected the thinking of the time, where violating this law would be seen as a crime against the state as well as religion. The law, which is seen archaic today, has been called for repeal by several activists to make the IPC laws more humane. A police officer argued that there were occasions when people showed up at government offices and threatened to violate this law to blackmail the system, and if this law was repealed, then there would be no way to prosecute such people. As of today, the law is still there in the IPC, but another law brought by the government in the late 2010s considerably reduced the scope of the use of this law. This law came in widespread discussion again in the mid-2020 due to a case which was very widely covered by the media. What is this law against? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. It is one of the most watched files of the world. It was defined as a global news phenomena by Wall Street Journal. It went viral on the internet, broke the algorithm, and also raised a ridiculous amount of charity fund. The second version was hosted officially on an even larger scale. The original version was started by a civil engineering student. The participants were called to particular coordinates, and their positive replies made the fight go down in history as one of the greatest fights ever. The fight was based on a common problem that a lot of people face every day. However, this same problem was treated more non-violently in a different country by a very powerful person by simply passing a law, which helps him solve the problem for everyone. Figure out the law which was passed and the name of the legendary fight. 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to question number 10. This criminal terrorizing the western coast America in the 70s and the 80s was caught after decades-long investigation. A former police officer, he committed several murders, rapes, and burglaries. Initially, he used to commit small crimes, but with time, his crimes became more gruesome. He also used to threaten and taunt the authorities and his victims through audio and written communications. The three-word nickname given to him reflects his reign of terror. The first two words refer to the state where he was active. He was caught using a modern scientific technique X. The authorities explored family trees on a public website. The use of the technique X ignited a privacy debate in America and whether the law enforcement agencies should be allowed to use it or not. What is the famous nickname of the criminal and what is the technique X? We'll wait for maybe 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. X, X is a judicial procedure which might seem outright insane today, yet it was common in the European Middle Ages. It was invoked in cases where judgment could not be made due to lack of witnesses or when party was unsatisfied with the verdict. Both the stakeholders would swear on an oath that they had no magical advantage and they rely on the belief that the god sides with the innocent. However, X was not very accurate, and by the 15th century, there were growing concerns regarding its usage. Soon it was outlawed as it allegedly favored rich noblemen and brownie thugs alike. X has been popularized by historical dramas. In fact, there have been multiple instances it has been demanded in the courtroom, where the requests have been unsurprisingly rejected, and in such cases people have been given an extra $300 fine or a sanity check instead. What is X? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. Among many things that stand out about this theatre, one is their refusal to perform a certain play. This was the last play on stage here in the 19th century, after which the theatre had to be shut down due to very sudden and a rather unexpected turn of events. When it was reopened after 100 years, the authorities justified not on putting this play as there is a key moment where it becomes a moral dilemma of whether to stop or to keep going, as both seem equally controversial. When performed elsewhere, an illuminated silhouette of a person is used. That moment, the play takes an abrupt pause and the actors make an announcement. Then the silhouette disappears and the play resumes. Why is this play historically significant? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. And sorry, this was a star marked question. We'll move on to the next question now. The inspector of central police was sent to the crime spot to assist the local police with the investigation of a double murder case. When he arrived, he found that the police had no lead. Soon he discovered a brown mark on the bedroom door. Carefully, he removed the section of the door and sent it for forensic analysis. This case laid the groundwork in proving the severity of this personal identification purposes as compared to anthropometry. As a result of this double murder case, Country X in South America became the first in the world to abolish anthropometry and file its criminal records based solely on Y classification. This resulting classification system is still used in many South American countries today. Which classification system is this? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to question number 14. Responding to the inquiries from journalists who noted a discrepancy in the durations listed in the complaint, the office said that the actual time was 7 minutes and 46 seconds. "It makes no difference," said the one who works with the families of crime victims in a city. It was said that the time duration was long enough to kill and execute him. The jury soon found the main accused culprit guilty on all three counts against him: second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. During the trial, a nationwide address, the president called it a too-rare step to deliver basic accountability. President stated that he met with the victim's young daughter. She told him that his father had brought the change in the world. The worldwide protests show how right she was. Under which hashtag the protest drew support across the world. To which case is the extract linked? 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. If you think you're a perfect rule follower, chances are you're not. By now, egg feels like a sort of resource that should be free, like water and air. It's a part of fabric of our world, the central tool for entertainment, media, communication, and work. In the early 2000s, many cities around the world announced plans to construct citywide eggs. According to 43A Act, it is a crime to steal eggs, but according to many professors, it's not clear. The rules vary from state to state, but most of the times the regulation is rarely enforced by police or prosecutors. However, a Michigan man has been fined $400 and given 40 hours of community service. If he would have tried to fight the felony charge then, he would face a sentence up to 5 years in jail or a $10,000 fine. What is the crime being talked about here? We'll wait 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to question number 16. Question 16 is a star marked question. For operating a drone, we don't need a license or risk punishment. There are, however, some limitations on the size, weight, and placement of drones for which a license is necessary. X requires license according to laws in India, but is also used illegally on Indian Independence Day, as it epitomes the spirit of independence and was one of the ways that Indians rebelled against British colonial rule, more specifically when the Simon Law was passed. The Y Act regulates the use/ownership of Ys, and X can be categorized as a type of Y as defined by law. Some historical sources suggest that X could have origins in Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, but it is widely believed to have been invented in China. Eggs are believed to come to India with Buddhist missionaries from east through the Silk Road, following which they traveled to distant lands such as Arabia and Europe. Since the law's implementation, despite numerous protests and concerns, nothing has been done to alter it. Name X and Y. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. The esoteric laws of Britain are among the most absurd features of this strange, old country. While in the midst of police, soldiers, and other types of official protection, prankster X, who also works as a freelancer writer for Y YouTube channel, comically attempted to break as many obviously absurd Asian British laws as possible, from handling a salmon suspiciously to wearing an armor, which leads to getting beheaded, to singing a lead ballad. X did it all, but went ahead being unarrested, also while performing it publicly, even in front of the police, as no one is even aware that such laws exist, not even law enforcers. X has also famously crashed the Paris Fashion Week. Y promotes itself on its coverage of underreported stories. It produces a daily news capsule titled News Beyond the Headlines, where it briefly discusses four daily news stories that other mainstream news sites did not give much attention to, but that it still believes are significant. It was described by The Guardian as one of the fastest growing YouTube channels, has more than 1.8 billion total views. Name Why, the channel. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. In the late 1890s, a heavily drunk British army officer thought that X was lurching towards him, which made the officer feel scared and ordered to arrest X. This X till date is till date chained to the ground and stands holding a board saying I am under arrest. This X is sometimes described as the perfect metaphor for colonialism. This X is often shown as a symbol of oppression of the colonies under the British rule and is today a popular tourist attraction, and people often come to click pictures with it, as X has acquired historical significance. What is X? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. We'll move on to question number 19 now. When the first sounds came from the speakers, we were sure that the modest amount of rest and quiet normally brought by the evening was gone forever. After a few awkward crows, the beast began to play marches, the Italian Fascist March and the Bandon-Wheeler March. This musical vomit lasted a little while, but then noise machine began again. In the beginning, the radio crackled uninterruptedly with noise. The number of records played was small, but the music had a penetrating power, as if from the halls of Valhalla a Teutonic bard howled to your arms, in a voice that sounded like it came from a wild animal. The music that issued forth from here, from records or the radio, had a crushing effect on the prisoners, hence making it the music made in hell. What was the mission with which this sonic torture was done? We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the next question. The brutal killing brought about one of the most unprecedented criminal defense strategies to emerge in the US history. Ahead of the trial, the criminal defense attorney also said that as a part of his defense, he planned to bring religion directly into the courtroom. In 2014, the criminal defense attorney stated, "It's a lot of crazy people out there that have contacted me to represent them with the same idea. But our case was based on fact, not fiction." It was claimed that nobody saw the victim who nobody saw who attacked the victim. A recently Warner Bros. Pictures released film in the deception of the same murder trial. Which film was it? Question 20 is a star marked question. Now we'll wait for 5 more seconds. We'll be moving on to question number 21 now. What could be a criminal offense you could possibly commit as a husband? Domestic violence, adultery, medical malpractice. But we are talking about a country X where husband gets warned by the police if they commit this forgetful crime and jailed if it happens again. However, it is not as scary as it seems, as it was shared by way too many respected news outlets, but there is no such official law. Talking more about this country, loads of prisoners of New Zealand, Australia, or USA, generally Pacific Islanders, are deported to this country for starting their life again, not as a criminal but a citizen of X. However, if they don't have any particular work, passion, or family to take care of, they end up increasing crime rate in X, drug peddling and murders to everything else in between, including the crime we are talking about if they have a family. Even if it is not considered a crime in other countries, not even in X, you still might attract serious repercussions as it might be an important day. Name or describe the crime X. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now we'll move on to the final question of this quiz. Question number 22. There aren't many nations that outlawed the practice X. A legislation banning X was approved in Idaho, however, it was not applicable in the rest of the US or in India. The victim may be wrongfully restrained or held against their will, and or the penetrator may abduct the victim while committing X. Additionally, the crime of intending to commit culpable homicide would be irrelevant if injuries caused by X were life-threatening, or they would end up committing the offense of trespassing on the burial places, and also could be booked for committing a deliberate and malicious act which is intended to outrage the religious feelings of any class. So yeah, though X isn't illegal per se, the person would in all likelihood end up committing several offenses under the law in the course of their endeavor. Name makes the practice or the crime being described. We'll wait for 5 more seconds. Now you have to submit your G forms within the next 90 seconds. After submitting the G form, you'll find a link to the answer discussion live stream, and we hope to see you all there. Last 30 seconds to fill your G form. Submit your G form. Thank you for participating in the quiz, and we hope to see you all in the answers live stream.